Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to EMS Office Hours. I am Jim Hoffman.
I'm Josh Knapp.
And I'm Dave Brenner.
Josh, you are outside today, I see.
I am. I'm enjoying a little bit of Pennsylvania time.
I hope you're wearing some sunblock.
SPF.
You're not.
100%, Dave. 100%. Because we in EMS always take care of ourselves first.
SPF 110 plus.
Yep. Yeah. It's basically a shield. I actually have an umbrella right over here. It's not open, but I have it.
Yeah. Josh, I'm just waiting a minute for get a few people popping in here before we get into the meat of it. But I wanted to I got to send you an email, Josh, about getting some wrenches to me. I'm trying to offer people that sign up at TurboMedic a free wrench if they sign up for a year.
Oh, that's a hell of a value.
At a special discount even to that. So
I just raised my prices. Anybody who buys through you is an extra $100. So they're saving themselves.
Yeah.
They're saving themselves now $100. So they should really go to TurboMedic. Save $100.
Thank you. All right. So last week after the show was over, we talked a little bit about something called flipping the classroom. And I wanted to talk about that today, but also, I saw a comment before that kind of ties into this when we talked about the flipping the classroom, but somebody had mentioned in one of the Facebook groups about how quitting and failing is easy, but they acknowledge that the EMS classes, EMT classes, paramedic classes are not easy. So I started thinking that that's pretty much a good thing, right? Because we don't want the classes to be so easy where just anybody can get a EMT card or a paramedic card. They have to kind of apply themselves and work at it and pass exams and skill stations and clinicals and all that stuff, to get that certification, And I'm sure, I think you guys are this would be a quick little segment, because I think you guys pretty much agree with me that it shouldn't really be easy to pass an EMT or a paramedic class,
Yeah, I'd like them to know something when they come to help me. That would
right. Exactly.
Right. Well, there's a couple of thoughts, and I know Dave can expand well beyond my meager capabilities as an instructor here. But when you have, failure rates tell you a lot of different things. I mean, if they're sporadic if they're sporadic or not even with like class distribution, you can probably look at it as a student issue. If it's more widespread, or when you're teaching a class, you ever teach a class and then, everybody's getting every segment of the class pretty well, good spread, good bell curve. And then you get that one segment of the class where everybody seems to be failing or getting substandard grades. That might be the teacher, right? I mean, that might be the teacher or the curriculum or the what you're using to teach with that is just not communicating that critical idea. So it's
or it's possible that there's a component of the course that's harder than others. Consistently, because I've looked at paramedic courses across multiple courses against multiple course providers. Yeah, I'm not just talking about instructors, but the agencies that provide it. If we were to identify 3 areas in paramedic classes that students have the greatest difficulty with, it would be math, pharmacology, which is the study of pharmas, and ECG. Those are the 3 areas where the students seem to have the most difficulty. Perhaps it's because they're more difficult. I'm just suggesting that that's a possibility. Perhaps it's a part where people have less of a foundation. Perhaps it's a weakness in instructor. Perhaps there's all sorts of perhaps. But if we looked at it across sponsorships, those three areas had the lowest. Just
yeah, and if you think about it, there are two pinnacles which, you know, in modern day, and I don't want to get too much into modern day education, but when we're generating people and getting them through classes, the theme that I continually hear again and again is that mathematics is not taught well and English language is not taught well. And pharmacology depends on a strong understanding of the English language because you have a lot of complicated words, a lot of words that seem made up. But, you know, you have to be
Wait a minute. You mean pharmacokinetics is not a real word? It is a real word.
Dave, you know what? I have no doubt in your grab bag that there would be a ton of very interesting words. But I mean, I think we could also agree on mathematics. Then you go into, and whenever you face a new subject that is sort of, let's say, alien to your previous understandings of the world. I mean, unless you're an electrical engineer and used to looking at cathode ray tubes that give you squiggly lines, sine waves, box waves, and all of that other, the square waves and all the other good stuff, you know, looking at an EKG for the first time can be a little unsettling. You know, this is an actual waveform made by, you know, resistance in the body telling me how the heart is beating and what areas of the heart muscle are beating well and not contracting well. You know, so
yeah,
I only and I'm not like I saw one of the individuals in the comments before. Pete Sawyer, he's having problems with his medic course. He passed the National Registry, and now he's having problems with the National Registry course. It's a tough test, and I think it's a little bit designed to be made that way, and I'm not sure that's the most effective way to teach.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to the flipped classroom idea. You know, because when we've got these subjects that start becoming challenging for the students, is it something that we should be, in essence, kind of having them teach it to each other? You know, and maybe that's a simplification of what the flipped classroom is. And I know that it's instructor led, and a lot of times the instructors give guidance on what they want the students to do, you know, to prepare for that class. Sometimes just watching audio videos or listen to some type of audio thing, or maybe taking a quiz before they come in so they have a little bit of a grasp of what the content's going to be discussed that day. I'm just wondering what you guys think, Dave, you being an instructor as well, your take on it and maybe the pros and cons of it, you know, when we talk about that environment, you know, for it. Part of me likes it because I feel that we have a lot of adult learners that come into EMS, and a lot of them are better off getting out of the seats and being more interactive with what they're learning. But some other ones, I don't know, sometimes I think you need to have that sort of strict, sort of didactic, you know, instruction on topics, you know. So I'm just wondering your guys' take on that. What do you guys feel? Like I said, maybe the pros and cons of it from your point of view.
Jim, I'd like to just answer Pete here, who's in the comment section, and he's asking, and he's struggling. I mean, he's looking to get to the next level as medic, and the National Registry medic is not an easy test. And like I said before, it's not made that way. But and I hate to internally plug, but if you go to Jim's site, Turbo Medic, you're going to get a lot of stuff there that will help you pass.
Well, I was going to say, you know, that's the thing I would try to tell people too, that there's a lot of stuff online you can get to help you prepare and pass exams. I always say, come to Turbo Medic when you need to augment what you can't find and what your instructors already taught you.
Go to Turbo Medic first. Just cut yourself out the extra searching.
But I will say this, Pete, if you're on the YouTube channel, it looks like you're coming from the YouTube channel. look at all the videos I have on there. I have a lot of videos on tips on how to prepare, how to study for any exam, not just the national registry, and it's all free. So check those out when you get a chance.
Or just individual class exams.
Jim has been working on this for nearly 20 years, so I can tell you that. And
it's got a cache.
He's had the input of brilliant minds like Dave Brenner.
Right.
And oh my God.
Between the three of us, we'll get you through.
Right.
So flipped classroom. How about that, Josh? What do you think?
Well, you brought this up last week, Dave, and I have to tell you that that I'm not, if it's the way that you guys are presenting the twist on it now, where it's like, okay, you guys teach the class. I'm not sure on how that works. If you don't have a foundation, if you haven't made your level up in understanding the subject matter, then how can you properly convey it with all the other language issues that we have today between mathematics and English? How are you going to convey a poorly understood subject to people who have no idea of the subject?
Well, the first thing I want to say a little bit about flipped classroom. Number one, it's not simply described in a sentence. It's not simply that students go home and prepare a video or a presentation.
They're all idiots.
However, Jim, I will agree with you from my perspective as a student. I prefer what the instructor has to deliver more than what a student's perspective is. Rarely do I get what I want from a presentation when I see it presented by a student. Now, I do want to give a little bit of background. Flipped classroom is not about EMS. It's certainly not unique to EMS. It was around before EMS jumped on the bandwagon with it, before the National Association of EMS Instructors think that it's the best thing ever.
Teach back.
That's
not quite teach.
Listen. When I was in second grade, back in the Jurassic period, at PS 241 in Brooklyn,
he was sitting there bagging two rocks together.
We were,
to himself.
And the teacher flipped the classroom. You know what the teacher did? Maybe you remember it. The teacher said, "Listen, next week the 5 people that present the news all week are David, Marissa, blah blah blah." And each day of the week, we either had international news, national news, state news, local news, and the weather. And what we did was it changed each day, but the 5 of us would get in front of the classroom. We'd hold the news articles from either the New York Times or the Herald Tribune. So that's a while back. We'd hold it by our chests like this, and we would tell everybody what was in the article. And maybe they would, this is second grade. That was a flipped classroom. So the flipped classroom is by no means a new idea, and it existed.
But that's not the flipped classroom like you're talking about today.
I'm just saying it is a component of flipped classroom where you go back and you go home first, you do your research and you present. That's one example, just only one. But having said that, I want to say that over the years in my career, and I have a long educational career, and in 1981, I became a school administrator supervisor in the K-12 system, and I've had the opportunity to observe hundreds of teachers teaching in a variety of methods. Some of them flipped classrooms even back then before we called it that. Some of them did not. Some of them were masterful. Some of them couldn't teach a dog to drool, couldn't teach not a German Shepherd, a St. Bernard to drool. Okay. And if you know St. Bernards, I have a fan apparently. Some of them were just awful. And I did have the opportunity to observe a paramedic instructor in the last 6 or 7 years who was masterful at teaching a paramedic course, and the classroom was flipped. And it was brilliant. I don't think I'd ever seen anybody do it as well as that instructor did it. But having said that, every bit of information that was presented that day, which was masterful, and the students were up above their eyes engaged, none of them presented as well as that instructor could present. None of them could present the depth and quality of that instruction. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that the students absorbed more or less from them. I know I would have absorbed more from that instructor than I got from the students, but that's me. And there is it. So if we were doing a drug trial, you know what? When you do research, the N is the number of people involved in the research, the subjects, right? How many N would you want before you were taking that drug? It's rather pertinent.
As large as you can get.
Right. So I went to the NY EMT textbook on flipped classroom, and I went down their annotations at the bottom, and I've gone online to see what primary source research and empirical data we have on the flipped classroom. And there is a dearth. There is a dearth of empirical data to support what we got. But the one empirical piece of data that they had, which seems to be when I go back to other empirical data, in other words, how many were there? What was the setting? So I'm going to tell you the N on the research, not the books about how I flip my classroom and my students are amazed, not how the engagement is incredible, not articles, not an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, not some teacher saying this was a great thing, but the N in the study, a research study, was 18. The students were grad students going for a doctorate in geology. And it was wonderful. I mean, it was just wonderful. There was no control group. Didn't have anything to compare it to. But if you know anything about doctorate education, it tends to be flipped classroom all the way. It's nothing new. They're always presenting their stuff. Once you get to the doctoral level, they have to present their stuff. They have to defend their thesis eventually. But the N was 18. 18. And we're flipping thousands and thousands of classrooms based upon an N of 18. And I went back even in the last week or so to do some more research on the flipped classroom. And most of the data, because now they do meta-analysis, they take all of the original studies and they throw them together. They do that in medicine too. They want to see how many people respond to amiodarone or whatever. They combined it in 13 studies. They put together where each one had an N of 500 or 700. Now they've got an N of 6,500, a better N. It's better to base it. So anyway, they went back and they looked at all of this stuff, and there was very little to begin with that were empirical data, primary source research with control groups, randomized on both and double blinded. Very little on that. But what they did find is that the students spent a lot more time preparing. And what they hypothesized when they looked at all the metadata is that perhaps it's not the method, but the time on task that the students had. In other words, if I'm going to prepare to teach you a short snippet on COPD, I've got a half hour to present to my class on COPD. How long does it take? Normally, I would get a half hour of instruction. It would be nice if you can get the students to read the book in advance, but we know that almost never happens. Almost never happens. So we get a half hour instruction. But if I'm going to present for a half hour, I know how long it takes me to prepare for a half hour presentation. It may take me another 6 hours to prepare for it. My time on task is incredible. So if we could get everybody to spend, all of the students to spend 6 hours on what was a half hour presentation, I suspect the 6 hours studying before and after total, I think we would have amazing results from students. Now, that's my opinion.
Now you're talking about like an additional multiple hours of preparation per class.
Sure, you don't think I just go in there and wing it?
Do you think that same multiple hours?
Some do.
Yeah, I know.
Well, no, let me,
and I can tell who they are when I see it.
But it comes down to, in a sense, is the amount of available time. We know that there are two like distinct versions of classroom. One where the student comes in and has nothing else to do that day. They have to go into class. They don't have any other worries or anything else. And then, you know, as more adult classes tend to form, you have people who have other responsibilities. And in EMS, since they pay us so well, we're usually working 2 jobs, and the third job is going to medic class, which in and of itself is an enormous amount of time. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't make it through medic class without, and Pete, I also made it through the National Registry. If I can do it, you can do it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Pete, if Josh can do it, you can do it.
If I could do it, you know. I only
That's
have a.
not true.
Yeah,
That's not true.
No, don't get them disappointed. But the idea is that how much time are you asking for a commitment, Dave? I mean, just to boil it down, you know, for this teach back.
Well, even like you said, Josh, too, like even at the EMT level, I see countless comments. I've gotten countless emails from people who are struggling with the courses where they're like, well, I have a couple of kids, or I'm going to school, or I have, you know, all these,
A single mother with
job.
a child.
I'm trying to get out of this crap job to get to EMT, which is a great job.
When they signed up for their course.
Yeah.
No one said it was going to be easy.
They see the course. They see the requirements, right? However many hours it's going to be per week, per day, how many days a week, and they go in their mind, oh, I can handle that. Until it's like getting this content that they have to study after class, before class, things like that, and then it starts to get, you know, overwhelming. So you talk about the flipped classroom, and I totally agree with you, Dave, with that. If you have the students that have to prepare for that presentation, if they're doing it right, it's not going to be, oh, go home, prepare for a 30-minute presentation tomorrow, and they're going to get it done in 30 minutes. No, it's going to take much more time to prepare to present something for, you know, 30 minutes, you know, to a class, you know. So I totally get that. And then now you've got that compounding on other things. And I looked at something about the flipped classroom. One of the cons for it was that it doesn't necessarily prepare students for standardized type testing like the National Registry. Right? It's not preparing for that because it's not necessarily covering the key points that they will expect to see on an exam like that. It might be covering the content, the subject matter, but it's not covering those bullet points that students are going to expect to see or will see when they're taking the test.
Guys, we all come back to that element of time. I mean, it really just boils down to that. And one of the problems, and you know, Peter, right after you're done with your National Registry and paramedic, I expect you to apply to the Baltimore Critical Care Program, because that's an awesome program. And you want to think you're being fed through a fire hose now? Sit in that classroom and see. And this is sort of my point. It's like in that critical care classroom, we went through pages, you know, every 30 seconds of the textbook or our notes, and we were fully expected. And if you wanted to compete and pass that class, you had to pre-prep. You know, have reading done in the subject matter before you even enter the class. Before you have a concrete idea of what the reading's even about, have that reading done. So that's a time commitment before class, during class, after class. You're being fed through a fire hose. Now, I want to just push this back on you guys and say, okay, when am I supposed to prep that extra depth so I can teach that subject matter back to the class in that fire hose format?
You knew you were going to get fed through a fire hose when you took this class. Seriously, we told you up front that's what was going to happen. Don't whine at me now that you got to take care of your kids. Listen, we did this. I was
That's
working.
true.
I was working a full time. I was an assistant principal when I took my paramedic class. There were no times. It wasn't like a 9 to 5 job. There was no end. I was the parent of 2 children. I was a husband. I was a volunteer, and I was teaching part time at one college. It was my. I gave up every weekend. I gave up every holiday that year. Or we didn't go away anywhere that year. Unless you call going to South Jamaica to ride an ambulance, a vacation. No.
Well, was Jamaica? Did you wear
Jamaica,
sunscreen?
right? Yeah, no. So, you're getting into
No,
it
because
when you're
the
getting
sun's
into
not
it.
out at night.
And people have got to understand that, and we don't blame people for trying to get out of whatever rut they're in, or to get out of whatever job they're in to better themselves. But that doesn't become our obligation. I also want to say something else. A flipped classroom isn't a flipped course. The whole course doesn't have to be flipped. You can flip a lesson. You can flip a component of a lesson. You don't have to do the whole class this way. It would be foolish to say that because that's not diagnostic prescriptive. That doesn't go to what the students need. It fails to adapt to changes. And if you're flipping the classroom and it's not working for, let's say, 50% of the class, you got to step back and say, my job as a teacher is to find a way to make this work for most of, if not all, the class. And if it's not working, if they're dissatisfied, if they're underachieving, you got to fix that.
And that was sort of my point at the beginning of this podcast, right? Where,
of course,
that you can recognize the issues that you're going to have walking into that class with education being the way it is, and you can pretty much surmise the people, their capabilities before they walk in. And then you're going to be throwing new subject matter at them. And if which has been taught 1,000 times before and will be taught 1,000 times after. And if you're losing a certain segment of your class, then there has to be some self-reflection for you as the instructor to say, am I not communicating this important subject correctly?
Yeah. Listen, I think, like I said, there's pros and cons to, I think, Dave's comment a minute ago about how you don't have to have every class has to be flipped. It can be certain subjects. It can be part of the class. One thing I saw that they recommend with the flipped classroom as well is that you don't send the students home, with this thing, all this homework, let's say, that they have to prepare for the next day for class. You let, there's a portion of the class that they're in, they can do it in class, right? Sort of like in class homework, so that they've got this sort of head start of what they're doing to get sort of maybe a basic formula of how they're going to prepare for the next day, what they have to study, X questions, and what the best things are to focus on to be able to present from the instructor that's there, so when they come in the next day or the day after, that they're prepared to do that. And I think one thing I think that I think that it's gotten better is that now, because of the realization that everybody learns a little differently, that some people, when it comes to full classroom, you can get students who really embrace that and get more out of it, right? Whereas Dave was talking about where, even myself, I get more out of that didactic, instruction than I would out of a flipped classroom environment. But other people, it might be flipped, right? They might get more out of that than they would sitting there looking at, a slide deck and listening to an instructor, present, but again, that goes back to the instructor and how they're presenting it, and are they making it somewhat engaging so that you're not dozing off when they're presenting.
And there is a spectrum between what they call, what you're describing, the sage on the stage, who in their head says, I talk, you listen, you learn.
Right.
To the flipped classroom, there is engagement. There's Socratic dialogue where we ask questions where the instructor questions people and almost has nothing other than question them to lead them down the right path. And that doesn't have to happen in an entire class or an entire course either. That can happen in just a 5-minute discussion about, I love doing that in DKA. I don't tell them anything. I only ask them questions about DKA, and we build the concepts. And that way I don't end up with, you remember the scales? It looked like the scales of justice when you were trying to remember the difference between DKA and hypoglycemia, which one had too much sugar, which had too little sugar. And then you memorized it before the test, and after the test, it was gone. But if you teach the concepts, boy, that's a whole nother story. You can build it. So there are methods of engagement that go from 0 to 100%, which might be the flipped classroom. And it could be 10%, it could be 40%. I think that even online, which makes a more challenging format to engage people, to have them talk back and forth, I try to question them. I've even had groups of people online. I try to have them echo some of the things I say because it's something I want them to say, So I think we can see that across the spectrum.
Yeah, I think I've watched several people that I know. They're not EMS people, but they are in college and high school, and I've watched them do the online instructing, and there's not a lot of engagement going on. There's lots of staring at the screen, walking around with the laptop, not a lot of attention being paid, going off and doing something else while the professor is talking or the teacher is talking. So there is that additional challenge for people that do that.
Or driving.
Or driving.
That scares me.
Whatever happened to study groups, right? I mean, do you recall those, getting together with people in your class and going to a coffee shop or, a student union or something like that and actually studying the subject in silence with books open together in mass? Do those happen anymore?
Yes.
Yeah.
They do.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Dave. I was losing.
Well, it's something that I offer and encourage a paramedic that we, once a month, I try to get members together to talk about things that they're challenging them.
Speaking of Turbomatic, I have a little bit of an administrative task here. For those of you who have gone to Turbomatic before the show, downloaded your podcast bingo cards, I have to disappointingly tell you that was not the Socratic method. That what Dave said was Socratic dialogue, so that doesn't count. Dialogue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But go to Turbomatic before the podcast, download your bingo card, come in, and prizes and happiness.
Exactly. Well, listen, I hope anyone listening to the show, if you're an instructor or a student, maybe has had experience with flipped classroom, that you're maybe leave some comments below, send me an email, let me know what your thoughts are on it. DM me on any of the social media channels and let me know your thoughts, and we can maybe come back and revisit it on another show. Guys, I want to just end today with your thoughts on something in the news. Now, if I had a fancy thing, I'd have news all over the video and flushing in and, but breaking news. It's not really breaking, but I saw
This is people who you don't know opinionated on subjects you really don't care about.
Right, exactly. So I saw this I gotta find the damn link now. It was about an EMT in New York, I believe it was upstate New York someplace, and they had all of their stuff done to recert, and apparently they didn't have the paperwork done, processed in time, and now they have to retake the entire, I guess, refresher again, to keep their card. So there's a big argument on this article where they're talking about it wasn't this EMT's fault, and it was the agency's fault for not filing it in time or not giving him enough time to do it. And I'm wondering what you guys think on that. I thought it was interesting because I don't know. I've recertified many times, and I don't know. I always make sure
You've
I'm
even
well in
been through-
advance of the deadlines. You
And
know,
when you weren't, there was a time I remember when you actually let a cert in another state expire, and
Yeah.
they were not being very helpful to you,
right?
and you ended up having to just do it again because that was your goals to work in that state.
Right, and that's the thing. You know, they're saying that they missed the deadline by 6 days. You know, and they've been in EMT for a while, and just this whole thing that they've not letting him do any kind of calls anymore because he's got to do the
refresher.
You know, and I don't know. I feel like, you know, there is an element here of letting time get away from you and not staying on top of what it is that you're doing. Now, this guy's a volunteer. I can go on a whole tirade.
That should be irrelevant.
On this day, it should be, but I feel
irrelevant
like
to me.
Well, yeah,
It is irrelevant, quite honestly.
but the thing is that this person's he has another full-time job. So,
Wah.
but I wonder. You have to ask yourself though, if
So mean.
this
I am mean.
certification was vital to his full-time job where he was getting paid, would he have let the 6 days go? Would have he been more on top of getting the paperwork in and everything so he wouldn't have to take this refresher class?
Jim, it's even worse.
The patient sats wouldn't have dropped as much had I changed the oxygen tank.
Right.
You know,
I
I was going to get around to changing the oxygen tank.
Jim, it's even worse this year because normally it's a 3-year CME cycle. And by the way, on the day that you get your new card, you know the deadline for getting your paperwork in for your next card. You know the deadline. And by the way, you can get it in if you're smart in New York State. You can get it in 9 months early, and then you will have 9 months and 3 years instead of just 3 years to your next recert date. So you know that. Normally it's 3 years, but this round in New York State, that person had 4 years. They had 4 years to mess this up. They took full advantage of it. A deadline is not the day you need to get it in.
Yeah.
The deadline is at the point where you said, oh my God, I really messed up big time. I got to get it in today. I should have got it in 6 months ago, but I put it off 6 months ago. When it was 5 months early, you blew it because you didn't get it in 5 months early. You did nothing to address your professional certification.
Yeah.
Jim,
the problem is, I think too, is that the other thing is that if you look at a lot of the comments in the article, most of it are not taking this EMT's side.
Good.
Well, and let's,
because they say, like Dave said, there's a lot of leeway there.
One of the aspects of this show is that idea that we're not an instructional show. We're not a news show. We're as if we were sitting on the deck. We're as if we're sitting on the deck having this conversation, right? But a couple of things that you should know from the opinions that are being shared here is that Dave comes from the education world. He's a full professor, and he's seen and heard just about every excuse in the book why your homework is late. So if he's saying here that, you know what, you should have had your paperwork in on time, sorry, then you can pretty much bring it back when you're discussing the show with your partners and friends to say, you got to have your paperwork on time. That's the way it goes.
There's a quick little story, if you don't mind. Do I have the time, Jim? I lost you. No sound from you.
Yes, you have the time, Dave.
Okay, so
yes, plenty of time.
Okay, so I just want to go a little biblical on us. All right, this I I said that while he was drinking. It almost came out his nose.
Please,
So
your biblical stories can have a twist.
I was there. I was there then. So it's and I don't want to get crazy. I don't want to go into the social stuff on this, but it's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where the Lord felt that it. I'm not even suggesting that you need to believe this. It's allegorical. It's a story that helps bring the point across
and connects to EMS.
It does connect to EMS. Boy, they had a good EMS system there, but the Lord felt there was too much sinning going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he said to Lot being the name of the fellow who was there with his family and folk, said, "Listen, get out of here because I'm going to level these two cities. This just not worth saving." So Lot, being a bleeding heart liberal, that I am, by the way, says to the Lord, "Listen, there must be some good people here. You can't destroy everything simply because of that." And the Lord says, well, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I do remember it as we get to the end. Find me 100 good people and I won't destroy these cities. So Lot says, well, what if I only find 99? Okay, I won't destroy the city if you only find 99. Bottom line, what if I only find one? Okay. I mean, this idea of procrastinating and whittling down standards to the lowest possible level. Of course, the Lord, the Lord knew what was going on there. And the Lord said, sure, just find me one. It's not like a fair bet. I mean, you don't bet against the Lord. You don't bet against omniscient, omnipotent, all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful. You don't bet against something like that. That's just, anyway, the bottom line was no. Lot couldn't find one, waited to the last minute, went all the way down to you know what I'm saying? It's like waiting to the last minute. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do that because the bottom line is at some point it's going to bite you in the butt. And just to defend New York State Department of Health Services, understaffed, overwhelmed, because we're all keeping in mind that we're also in a pandemic, which has health department ramifications. And they have set up the standards, and there are multiple checkpoints along the way. You have a CME coordinator in your agency. You usually are affiliated with a CME coordinator on the county level. And if you don't get your stuff together, shame on you. Put it there. You know what? There's an app for that. It's called The Calendar. The Calendar. 1 month before it's due, have a gong go off in your phone. 15 days before it's due, have the gong go off in your phone and say, you fool, you only have 15 days left. When there's only 5 days left, have the gong go off and say, I can't believe you waited this long. And on the last day, the gong goes off and it doesn't go ding, ding, ding. It goes, wah, wah.
Yeah.
You messed up.
Listen,
the thing is, to sum that up, there's not a lot of sympathy here if you miss the deadline.
Not for me.
Yeah. And listen, he's going to have to take another basic refresher class and
one on time management.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, you know what? Maybe
I hope they're not in our audience.
Be beneficial. I see a lot of people. Listen, I see a lot of people who promote taking their refresher and not doing the continuing education. Some people love it. I just saw somebody talking about that with the paramedic stuff for National Registry recertifying, and they were like, just challenge it out and, don't worry about the CMEs. You're better off.
Well, it used to be if you wanted to be an instructor, you had to take the refresher class and score a certain level.
You had to take the written test.
The written test. Oh,
yeah. So even if you took CME, you could take the written test.
Oh, okay. Still, is that still the case?
No. Now being an instructor,
so we've
it's kind of like firefighter 1. You get it for life. It's like herpes. You get it for life.
So we've actually lowered the standards for instruction as well.
Oh, sure.
So the students
there are things you have to do. You still have to teach a class once in a while, but you don't have to. You don't have to redo the.
Or you can flip the class and not even teach it at all.
Now there you go.
Put your student down as the CIC.
Right. That's all. All right, guys. We'll end it there, I guess. I just wanted to get your take on that little that article. See if there was a sympathetic ear in in the group because I wasn't seeing any online. I'm just wondering if I had, somebody else maybe had a sympathetic viewpoint, to it. If you read the article,
EMS,
what kind
we
of
eat
crying
our
the
young.
woes about being a father and volunteering for 15 years and all this stuff. And I don't know. I just feel like, it's no one. I don't think most people in EMS that go through it have to, realize that they're not really going to be sympathetic to somebody letting it expire. So, all right, we're in it there. I think we just lost Dave. Josh,
I'm here.
I think Dave popped out though. But
Oh.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for anyone that popped in the live video feed. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much for the comments. Thank you for the likes, the little heart thingies there.
Hey, Dave.
I really appreciate it. And that's it. Guys, as always, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me. It's jhoff, JHOFF at emsseo.com. And of course, you can always DM me on any of the social media channels as well. And I will try to get back to you and answer any questions you might have, or even let you come in on a live session with me and Josh and Dave, and we can talk a little bit.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, we'll talk about what you want to talk about here on the show as well. So, all right, that's it, guys. As always, I am Jim Hoffman.
Josh Knapp.
Dave Brenner.
And all my dogs barking in the background. Stay safe, everybody.